All right, we're talking here with Bob Utterback at the National Farm Machinery Show. Bob, the Farm Journal economist. Three tenets of a good marketer and the marketer to the future, Bob.
I think there are going to be three things. One, you have to be a good producer, produce a quality product, and be able to store it and sell it when the client wants it. Two, you're going to have to be able to have a marketing plan that once you achieve your profits, that has flexibility to react to unknown events. And third, you got to aggressively control your input costs on a multi-year basis so that you can, when the market gives you that price event, you can't forward sell. This is one of the big things we learned in 2008 and 2009.
All right, flexibility with the storage. Let's start there.
Okay, flexibility with the storage is you've got to have ability to, I think we learned this year, you got to be able to store your product during harvest. A lot of people in Minnesota and everything areas had real problems with their dryer capacity. I think we've got the storage ability, but we haven't got a dryer capacity. I think a lot of guys are going to work on that. But another area we need to really focus on is that there's an allocation of natural gas. You couldn't get to LP gas to basically dry your capacity. So you maybe not thinking about increasing your capacity on farm, storing it when it's available. So when you come into harvest, you don't have your dryer limiting your harvesting capability.
Just to be, a cynic, I guess here, there were some problems in particularly northeast Iowa, southern Minnesota, with getting LP to some of the farmers that needed it this year on their dry. Was this just an abnormal year? Is that...
You had it in Iowa, you had it in Minnesota, you had it in several regional areas. And as we go into the future, as we are in a global economy and we have short-term shortages, I think control of the physical commodity is going to become increasingly critical. Farmers which have time-sensitive situations, nitrogen in the spring, LP in the fall. I would be, if I had the economic size, I'd be working on my operation to increase my capacity to avoid that bottleneck, because it's very difficult when your combine's ready to go and you can't get, and you got wet corn, you can't dry it. That's a really big bottleneck on the operation.
All right, marketing plans. It's not new.
It's not new, but in the marketing area, I think the failure we saw this year, the market's given us a very good return, good investment here in the December-January time period. We had 440, 450 corn. People walked away from it because they were still thinking about 2008, 2009, and that plus they had old crop corn in the bin, and they didn't pull the trigger. I think I challenge you as farmers, you got to start thinking about locking in these 30 to 40% return on investments when made early. You got to be able to provide and put a floor on the market. But then as you get into April to May, June time period, I think you have to assimilate a technology of being a synthetic put. If you're short cash, long call, or if you have been short futures, have good profits, you roll in, like that's what I'm doing right now. I'm taking my short futures, rolling them into a put position, so that if the market takes off, after April 1, between April 1 and June 1, if you take out the previous month's high, or the 50-day moving average, and you're aggressively short the market is giving you a warning sign. You need to do something to protect the cash flow, because what happens, even though we've locked in a great profit, if the market takes off and the cash flow goes up, one can't not take advantage of that big multi-year sale because you've been worried about cash flow.
Okay, well, you're still talking about some type of reactionary measures there based on market conditions.
Right.
That, when you hear plan, you think, we have to do this, this, and this, then, but you're not talking about that, I don't think.
What I'm saying about a marketing plan is we have a game plan set. If this condition occurs, I'm going to be hedged this way. If events change, I know before event how I'm going to adjust my short position to react to the market. You do not get into the heat of battle and decide what you're going to do, because invariably you're going to, emotions and cash flow pressures will almost always make you do the wrong thing at the right time.
So it's planning your reaction.
It's planning your reaction before the event occurs, and how you decide how much risk can you take. Where is your, and what's your game plan going to be at that point is critical, because we're starting out selling the market when we're locking in profit. Conceptually, I'm saying between 30 to 50% return investment, we should have 1 year pre-sow. If we go from 50 to 75, we should have 2 years. And if we go to 75 to 100% return investment, which we had in 2008, we should have been 2.5 to 3 years sold. Well, that's a lot of cash flow. You got to work with a banker so he understands what you're trying to accomplish, your wife, your partners, everybody's on the same page. We know how we're going to do it. If the market does this, how we're going to cash flow it. And that's the planning process. It cannot be just a wake up one morning, I'm going to sell 2.5 years of production. It just doesn't happen that way.
All right. Third point now, low cost producer always wins.
The biggest mistake I think we learned in 2008, 2009, when the market gave us the price we want. We had the blow off top in 2008. We all vapor locked because corn fertilizer values were at 1,200 and going higher. Cash rents were taking off. Oil was costing us $5 at the pump, and we really didn't know what our cost was going to be. Therefore, producers found it very, very difficult forward contracting 09 and 010 production in 08 because they didn't know what their cost structure was. So the moral to the story is, unless you can lock in your inputs before the event, it'll make it much more easier to do that set. So that's one of the challenges I think we have in here when we have price weakness. Right now, like specifically in cash rents, I would be working very hard on cash rents to try to do a multi-year rather than 1 year to year. If I'd go the longest time period I can, and I really prefer 5. I know I've got 5 years, I got my costs at these costs, and so you know where you're starting from. Then the second one would be fuel costs. I would be this summer, if we could get fuel prices and crude oil down in the low 60s, high 50s, doing a multi-year fuel cost protection, because I'm convinced by 013, 014, you'll see crude oil prices $120 to $150 a barrel. That's helpful for corn, but helpful increases the input costs. And then the final one, and the biggest one, is fertilizer values. I think this is our Achilles heel in agriculture. As our yields get bigger, we have cellulosic, we take off our corn stalks. The fertilizer that we have to put back into the ground is going to be controlled by companies that are going to make sure the demand shows up before they build a capacity. And then you'll have time periods when you have big shocks in the market, and when that shock occurs, the farmer is the one that's going to have to take the hit of that shock. And it's going to be very difficult for him to forward buy fertilizer. He might be able to get 1 year, and in 1 year buying, he's going to have to take inventory, and he's going to have to physically build the facilities, have the security. That's a whole level of new management, but I think you got to do it. But I'm also challenge you to think beyond 1 year fertilizer price protection. And one of the concepts at Utterback Marketing that we'll be working on is trying to figure out what, I would argue $3 corn is to $450 fertilizer to $350. There's a relationship there. If corn will go to 6, it would have an impact on fertilizer prices as well. And so we will be working on a concept on the fall lows of trying to buy enough corn units to offset future fertilizer cost increases associated with a higher corn price. It is a speculative program, and we have to excel as that, but it's really a hedge against future fertilizer values, because what happens if we have a weather event dovetail with all the fun activity, you could see a spike in corn prices between May and June every year for years in the future. As a seller, I've got to have a marketing plan to protect myself against that price, and I'm hedged. But I also, when that price event takes off, fertilizer values take off, and it's the year after the event. So as we saw in 2009, prices were going down, but fertilizer values were still relatively high. And that's what we had to protect ourselves.
All right. That's Bob Utterback here at the National Farm Machinery Show. Bob's the Farm Journal economist, and thanks very much, Bob.